On today's episode of Audit Austin Code Compliance, I'd like to show you a piece of property over here on the east side of Austin. I spent a lot of time volunteering over at Oakwood Cemetery, so I'm going up and down East 12th Street all the time. So I thought I'd take a look at East 12th Street and look at some of the older properties there and see what was going on. And I happened upon this property right here. It is 1501 East 12th Street. And I wanted to see kind of what was going on here because I've been to this. This is an old two-story house that is used as an African-American cultural history museum. And so I noticed that it was turned in on May the 5th for a code violation, structural condition violation. And the case was opened on May the 5th, but an inspection didn't happen until July the 10th, which I found was kind of odd because typically there within 3 to 5 days, the code people are supposed to be out there to look at this piece of property. And so we learned that on June the 7th, okay, this is July 10th, I guess is the last episode. So on May the 5th, it was turned in. On June 7th, over a month later, there was an information update. On June the 23rd, they finally did an inspection and found no violations. And then there's an information update on July the 10th. And the contact is Troy Collins. And I've run into this inspectors, if you want to call them that, work in the past. So this one really piqued my mind, and I wanted to kind of follow it along. So I did an open records request, and I asked for the case photos, the case log, and I wanted to see exactly what this guy was doing. But before I did that, I went by the site and I took photos myself. And this is what I found. So this was turned in like May the 5th, I think. I went out on the 13th and I found out that this is known as the Southgate Lewis House, an old historic house. And here's that front of the house here. You can see that it's an old two-story house, and they've got all kinds of photos and information about important leaders in the Black African-American community at this location. There is no address posted on the front of this property. As a retired firefighter, that's the first thing that popped into my attention. When you walk up the front porch, you can see that there's rotting wood here, that they're starting to replace some of the material here. So from the street it may look okay, but this piece of property's got a lot of problems. For years, people have just been painting over the rotted wood, and now the paint is giving up. You can see the rotted wood here. This is all structural code violations. You can see up in here the wood trim where it's been painted. As you walk around the house, it's not hard to find issues that are just glaring at you. You see this spot up here where the soffit's falling out. Here's a close-up view. The soffit is literally rotting out of this house. The next photo down below, this post is rotting away. You can see that they've just been painting over it. This is a structural post. You can see the rot down in here. You can see that somebody's added a new deck back in here. There's new deck boards. All this is gray, and this is fresh lumber. And you can see the cupping on the boards here. This deck didn't appear to be built very well. I walked on it, and it was very spongy. You can see that somebody's just, whether this is an old patio or something here, but they're just laying boards across here and maybe using old pallets or something. But this deck is not engineered to code. And again, you can see that there's new lumber had been put in. This is a little outbuilding that was the schoolhouse. One thing of note is you've got some steps here, but there's no handrails or anything here. The side is not ADA compliant. This just screams at you back here. Here's a back porch light, and you can see that the exposed electrical wiring. Again, this is within a week or so of this thing being turned in, I ran across it, and went by. The property's open. It's a historic landmark. They have to keep the gates open. Nobody's inside because it's not open very often. I went back a little bit later, and they disconnected some of this stuff and just kind of put it up here. But I wondered where this went. And it goes to a regular utility lamp that has been screwed to the building. You can see the bad electrical tape job here, and it was just coming back up this way. And so if there's ever a house that is just waiting for an electrical fire or for a collapse, this is it. By the front door, there's plumbing. Evidently, they've made their own sprinkler system and just come off maybe back here somewhere and run things. So you can't do this. You need plumbing permits to do all that kind of work and backflow preventers. So that's what I found. Let's take a look and see what our code inspector found. So anybody has the right to do this. As part of a transparent, free, and open government, you can do a public information request. So I contacted the law department, and I said I would like to inspect the Austin Code Department's case record, as well as all photos and emails pertaining to the code case. And from the building department, I'd also like to inspect the certificate of occupancy for 1501 East 12th Street. And from the fire department, I would like to inspect the last 3 fire inspections for this business. The fire department's job is to ensure that when you and I go to a public building, that it's safe. And so from the outside, this didn't look very safe, but I know, being a retired firefighter, that that's part of their job. So I figured between the certificate of occupancy and everything else, I could get a big picture of what was going on. And let me share with you what I found out. All right, this is the code case log. The status of this case is closed. The address is 1501 East 12th Street. The lot's legal description is here. The property owner is said not recorded. Now, there has to be an owner for this. This just shows laziness on the part of the inspector. The complaint day was May the 5th, and here we get to see what the complaint was. This is a museum inside of an older 2-story home. The family and I visited a few weeks back and had a nice time, but found the condition of the site a bit unnerving. There were 15 or so visitors in the home, and at times it was crowded. I had the feeling that if there were an emergency, that people would be hurt trying to leave the property. I noticed there were no fire extinguishers or exit plans posted. I wonder if this occupancy has the proper permits and inspection to be a museum. They have added onto the deck on the back, and the floorboards move as if there is little support. This is exactly what I found when I went there. Of course, I didn't get to go on the inside. It's like walking on a floating dock. Also, the back porch light had exposed wires. Perhaps if you have an officer who could give it a once-over, and perhaps have the fire marshal tag along, any discrepancies could be addressed. And so, Troy Collins was assigned on May the 5th. And on June the 7th, over a month later, he states that he spoke with Chris. I don't know who Chris is. He failed to put the person's last name. That's part of what his job description says on good report writing. Chris, that works at the property. Chris stated he's in the hospital and he would have someone call. Okay, that's on, evidently on the 6th, but he didn't say that he talked to anybody. So that was the 7th of June. On the 23rd of June, he states he found no violations. He says this is a museum and this property is under minor repair. No permits are required to replace the trim around the windows and post. You do need permits to replace that trim, and you do need a permit to replace that post. The deck at the rear isn't new. Now, somebody didn't say it was a new deck, did they? They've added a deck on the back, and the floorboards move as if there's a little support. It's like walking. So they questioned the structural integrity of the deck, and I know that to be bad. But here Troy Collins is just discounting all of this and said that the deck at the rear of the property isn't new, but I showed you the new boards. The property was once a house with a front and back door exit. What does that have to do with anything? The rear porch light is being replaced with a new fixture. Okay? And so on the 10th, a couple weeks later, he says, per conversation with Bertram Allen, I don't know who Bertram Allen is, this property is known as the W.H. Passion Historical and Land Make, that they have open house and show the history of African Americans from Austin. It's just poor grammar here. This property is zoned, and the CO is for a single family residential. So it doesn't have the proper certificate of occupancy. But he's closed the case and said there are no violations here. Even though it doesn't have the proper certificate of occupancy, Mr. Collins would have you believe this property is entirely up to date. So let's see what the certificate of occupancy came back as. So this is the certificate of occupancies. This is what the building department gave me. My public information request is 35362 for the three things that I asked for. You just saw the code department stuff. Here's the building certificate of occupancy. So it's related to this building permit number from 1998. Date issue was 1998. The building address is correct. This is here. The proposed occupancy is left blank. It doesn't have a proposed occupancy. This is an incomplete form. Re-roof a single-family residence. Miscellaneous repairs. So this was for a single-family residence, not a public museum. Square footage, 0. Sprinkler system, no. Code year, code type. All of these things are blank. There's no information here. This document is essentially worthless. Certificate of occupancy, it says this is to certify that it's in compliance with everything else. Building code reviewer, Carl Wren, who just retired, but Carl Wren's signature is not here. This thing has been rubber stamped. Somebody at the city just rubber stamped this building permit, didn't go out and inspect it, didn't do anything. The form's not even properly filled out. This is the last certificate of occupancy they have for this structure. The structure is not rated to be a public museum. It's a single family home. We look down here and reissued a certificate of occupancy in 1967. The building and structure, and again, was used as a duplex. Okay, but it's not a duplex anymore, but at least this one was filled out properly and is signed by a city official. This is a reissued from 1976. I was in high school back then. It was used as a daycare center. Again, somebody signed it. And in 1979, residential, used as a residence. And again, someone signed it here. So the city does not have a current certificate of occupancy for this structure. The one they have, the last one they have, is dated 1998. This is 2017. It's almost 20 years ago. 19 years ago. In fact, it's coming up on 19 years right now. And it wasn't even signed. So, no certificate of occupancy. This is an illegal use of this building. Let's take a look and see what the fire department has done. One of the functions of the Austin Fire Department is to ensure that you and I, when we are visiting public buildings, that it's a safe place, that the doors aren't chained shut, that minor electrical work and things like that. The fire department works hand in hand with the building department and with the code department. So I asked for the last 3 inspections from the fire department here, and this is 2017. This is July the 13th of 2017. The last time they were there was 9/21 of 2016. Okay? They want to have a special event there, a pre-meeting or a pre-inspection. It was at the Passion Historical Society. There's a contact. There's a phone number. Missing code, see comments. they said back then it was unsatisfactory, that the event was not approved. Said the AFD inspector was never able to speak directly with the applicant, voicemails, and return calls, but made phone interview was never made to determine site setup needs. So, that's the only inspection the fire department gave me. The fire department has never been inside this building, has never inspected it to be a museum. The one time over a year ago that they were contacted, the people there just didn't return their phone calls, so evidently they couldn't have their meeting, whether they went to it or not. So, the concerns that somebody had initially, and of course now my concerns are, is that the Austin Code Department, the Austin Fire Department, and the Austin Building Department have all three dropped the ball on this. This is a very cool building and it's worth saving. You can see there's not much of this architecture like this left around Austin. But let's be very frank. If this was anybody else's home and there was rotting wood going on and somebody was doing work like this and changing things, any other code inspector would write them up for not having the proper permits. If there was rotted wood in the boards, up in the windows, in the soffits, and down here on the structural post. I have a friend who had a structural post that was bad, and the code department threatened her with fines of $2,000 a day unless they got a permit to change that structural post. This post is not good. But yet Troy Collins found no violations at this property. Troy Collins said there was no new work on this deck, but the deck itself does not have any permits. And this sure does look like new wood to me. And I walked on this deck, and I agree with whoever turned this thing in. It is like walking on a floating dock. You can see the trip hazards up in here. People that have well-meaning just sometimes shouldn't be allowed to do things like this because it's just not safe. If this is a museum and they're having public events here, someone's going to get hurt. Again, I'm not fully up to speed on ADA laws, but I believe you have to have a handrail here. Again, the electrical is not up to speed, and that is surely not up to speed, nor is the plumbing. When you look at Troy Collins' photos from his case log, this is what he took a photo of. Again, here's Mr. Collins' case log that is now closed. There's no problems out here. He only put a couple of photos in. He took a photo of the front porch. You can see that rotted wood piece, but he conveniently didn't show you that piece of rotted wood here on this frame. And he didn't show you the rotted wood over here. But you do see that they're replacing some wood around here. You can't just put new wood on and band-aid things and paint things over. Okay, so he was there on June 23rd. Again, this was turned in on May the 5th, but Code Officer Collins couldn't be bothered, or perhaps he chose not to take photos until the 22nd. The photo I had of this back porch showed this thing all exposed and open. You can see all the trim that's coming off the building here, and you can see the wood here. Now, this is Friday the 23rd is when he did this, but he took the pictures on the 22nd. This photo here is very clearly, you can see that they've basically taken out that electrical box that was here. You need to have electrical permits to do things like this. You can't just change the wiring and redo boxes. Mr. Collins knows that. He got caught falsifying a record for electrical work at a local church just down the street from here. You'd think he would have learned his lesson. Again, he's taken a photo of the other angle here, but he's not showing us the soffit. Here he shows us a piece of that rotted wood is still here. And evidently they're doing work here, so who knows how much of this building is rotting away. He didn't show you the soffit on the backside. He didn't show you very much. He showed you what he wanted to show you to allude to the fact that he doesn't think there's anything wrong here. This is a problem. When you have city inspectors that are not inspecting buildings and looking the other way when there are obvious problems, it could very well be that this inspector is taking a bribe. Or perhaps he's friends with these people and he just wants to look the other way. We cannot allow this type of incompetence and tampering with government records. Knowingly making false statements on a government record is a Class A misdemeanor. So, City Council members, Director Wright, you and I have had a conversation about this employee in the past. This is not the first time, not the second time, not the third, nor the fourth time I have talked about this particular inspector. Question is, what will the City of Austin do about this? Are they going to wait until somebody is seriously hurt or perhaps even killed in one of these old rat buildings? And if that does happen, perhaps somebody will run across this video and hold all the city council members and the director of Austin Code and the director of the building service department and the fire chief responsible because somebody said something and the city decided just to rubber stamp it and close the case.